Diver's Dream is a game that only the very few will like. Not because the game is bad or something, but rather because it's absolutely not for everyone. Sure, well, which game actually is for everyone? There is none. But even then, there are certain games or even genre that attract only a handful of people, and that's exactly what Diver's Dream is. The title should say it all, so yep, it's a game where you explore the blue underwater world. Well, you can explore it technically, but with limited possibilities, but I will get to that later. For the PlayStation, what KCE Sapporo has developed here is actually quite impressive and shows others how such an idea, or rather unique genre, can be done. Released in 1998 in Japan as Dolphin's Dream and in Europe as Diver's Dream, both released by Konami, but not in North America for some reason, you meet a young man named John, or whatever name you wanna give him. John is a professional scuba diver looking for treasure and adventure, and gets wind of the gigantic Matilda, a Titanic-like ship that sank somewhere, along with a very valuable treasure before World War II. An old man named Roberto approaches him, starts talking about gigantic Matilda, and from then on they start working together as well with Roberto's granddaughter Olivia to find Matilda and recover the treasure. Olivia shows Jean, or you, where the item and the antique shop are, you get your diving equipment, and you will start your first mission. This mission is simply to find an underwater camera for the item shop owner Basilio. In the end, of course, you will find the gigantic Matilda, explore her, and obviously find the treasure as well, much more. Well, let's face it, the story is absolutely nothing out of this world. But hey, you need a reason to explore the underwater world, right? Only strange that Jean, or you, has no diving equipment even though he is a scuba diver. Maybe he was on vacation or something, who knows. There is actually a background story to Roberto, and he probably is the most fleshed out character. As a young lad, he was once on the Matilda with both of his bodies, and his task was to both protect a royal treasure and deliver that treasure by ship. He is the only one with an actual background story in the game, but at the end of the day, even if he says that this is about the treasure and finally make that delivery he had to do years, decades ago, it is about the gold on the ship, even if he does not admit it at first. Well, maybe the gold may be just a bonus for the work Jean had to do throughout the game. According to the opening, well, rather scrolling text that's not a real opening, but whatever, so far no one has been able to recover much from the Matilda. So of course Jean will save the day here. And by the way, why is there white text on a very bright background video in the opening? Who came up with such an idiotic idea? Trying to hide the text so we cannot read it or something? Jean himself has hardly any personality, he is mostly just there, and that's basically it. But in itself, that is not necessarily bad, because his goal is actually only the adventure, and for that, he does not need personality. Well, at least according to the developers. Well, okay, in the course of the story he will meet some dolphins and they will play an important role, but I will come to that later. Olivia herself is basically meaningless. She is practically the third wheel, it does nothing and has hardly any purpose except for two moments. The first is obviously in the beginning, where she shows you around. The second one is when she disappears around the middle of the game, and only reappears in the last chapter. You might think Roberto would actually know this, since, after all, he was on the ship and his two buddies also died at the time, but apparently nobody knew how the ship sank, because such information, for some reason, was kept secret by the government. So she comes up with the idea to research the internet, disappears from the game to come back in the last chapter telling John and Roberto that she found out what happened. And according to her findings, the Matilda was hit by an out-of-control Japanese submarine. But the question is, why did she not come up with the idea earlier? Or why Roberto, one who was on the ship and experienced the disaster firsthand, never bothered to find out what happened? We are talking about 50 years here. Roberto is an old man now. But, okay, well, if I assume that the story in the game took place in 1998, yes, I just assume that because the game itself was released in 1998, and the internet was not yet the norm, then, well, okay. You will not swim around freely as one might expect. Instead, you will go from the port by ship to the spot on the map, and if you dive, then you are directly inside the sunken ship, or cave. For the most part, however, you will be on the Matilda because she has several sections or levels or whatever. And actually, it's quite a shame that you cannot swim yourself from Roberto's ship into the cave or even Matilda. Unfortunately, you are automatically placed there and only then you can explore. Because it would have been cool if you could decide for yourself whether to take Roberto's ship to the destination or the point on the map, or if you swim independently until then, meaning from the base to the point. But even if you are finally at your destination, the exploration itself is actually limited to the corridors in which you are in, meaning that you won't have real freedom to explore. But this even becomes a problem on the Matilda. Sure, the ship has several levels or stages or sections or whatever, some rooms you can enter, and very small labyrinths, but that's about it. In general, you only need to swim forward, precisely because the levels generally do not offer alternative routes, and you are already at your destination, without having to fight for it. And that's actually a pity, because it would have been cool if you could explore the ship freely, or even the caves at the beginning. Of course, the caves would need to be bigger for that. The challenge itself is also almost non-existent. Sure, for the most part you will just swim around anyway, if you want to call that exploring, so there will be hardly any enemies. Technically there is only one enemy, and that is a shark. Well, there actually are several sharks in the game that you can kill with spears, but although you actually have to kill the first shark to advance in the game, the rest are only optional, which is actually a shame. It would have been cool if at the end of each chapter there was always a boss to fight, but no, there are no bosses, except the shark in chapter 2. The biggest challenge here is trying to have enough air in the tank before you finish a level. At the beginning, you still have small areas where you can breathe for a bit before going back down with your snorkel, but later you have no way to do so because you are approaching the seabed. If you run out of air, you lose health and death will follow. If that happens, then you have to start the level from scratch or start from the checkpoint. Well, technically the beginning of a level is a checkpoint, but on the Matilda you will find these checkpoint, let's call them gems, because the levels will take longer to complete. But you can also buy these air ponies, or whatever they are called, that will fill up your tank a little bit more. So you can't take too much time underwater. Sure, later you can buy better diving equipment, but still, your time is limited. However, until you can buy better equipment, you need money, and you can only get it if you find treasures underwater and the antique shop owner evaluates it. Seemingly, at least from what I've read, many players were upset that the objects you find underwater are absolutely random. Sure, they always have a certain shape to them, but still they could be whatever. Accordingly, the value of your found treasures will always be different. Thus, sometimes you might recover items that are worth absolutely nothing, and you have to go look for new ones, or you find ones that are worth quite a lot, and everything is recorded in your collection, that you can see what the evaluated objects actually look like. For some reason, it may seem annoying that you don't know what items you are salvaging, but I think it's still a decent system. What's more annoying is the fact that John can only recover 12 items at a time. In the beginning, I can understand why, but after a while, you might ask why you cannot upgrade his equipment or something so that he can recover more at once. So, okay, from this perspective, I can understand why the recovery system of the items can be annoying. Since you are underwater, you will naturally move slowly, and there's a reason for that. Although Diver's Dream is a game about a guy who is looking for his adventure underwater, it also tries to be a diving simulation. Well, I've never been diving and I don't know anything about it, so I could be wrong when I call this game a simulation. But I think that's why this game is the way it is, as if Diver's Dream wants to give you that feeling of really being underwater. Another thing that can get annoying are the instant kill. Every now and then you trigger something that kills you immediately if you don't swim out of the way, and that's a really cheap way to increase the challenge of the game. Nevertheless, they are not completely unfair because you generally see what is triggered and usually have 2 to 3 seconds to get out of the way. You just have to take a closer look in what might collapse or something. The underwater world itself, yes, it does exist and you can explore it, but not in the story. You can only do it in free mode. In free mode you have infinite air, infinite spears and even infinite scope. All kinds of fishes are here. Well, almost. I wanted to see how big this world is or even how deep you can dive, so I played for 30 minutes total and I saw the seabed very early on, but no end in any other direction. I decided to swim only in one direction for about 20 minutes non-stop and didn't even see invisible walls. But then again, no sharks or anything else either. Well, I guess this mode just exists only to examine some fish, but if this is it, then it's a shame that you cannot take photos of them. Graphically, Diver's Dream is quite okay for 1998. Sure, you will see some glitches that were common for the time, like clipping or something, but still, you can see that the developers have made an effort. Even the very few cutscenes look quite okay for the time. but the soundtrack is even better. It is absolutely perfect for this underwater world, and if there was a soundtrack CD, then I would buy it. They are slow and relaxing, giving you the feeling of an underwater world where you just sit back and watch the fish swim by and fall asleep after a while. Yeah, it's that relaxing. Except, of course, if you have to fight sharks or swim away from these crabs or whatever they are called, then it gets more action-packed. And finally, Diver's Dream has two endings, and here I will go into the dolphins because they are important here. During the story, you will see and hear dolphins from time to time. They help you out of trouble here and there, but mostly they are just watching you. And in the first ending, you are just going to take the treasure and the gold, swim back to the top, and that's about it. You live your life. In the second ending, however, which I will not spoil, play it for yourself, the dolphin invites you into a bizarre scene with other dolphins, and John never sees Roberto or Olivia again. So yes, that's a kind of fuck the treasure ending. There's a theory that John himself becomes a dolphin in a spiritual way and lives with them from then on. I don't think that either of these endings are actually bad endings. Both are good endings, only it's up to you to decide which of the two you prefer. Either the spiritual ending that becomes faithful to the Japanese title of the game, Dolphin's Dream, or the, let's call it, humanitarian ending that becomes faithful to the European title, Diver's Dream. Well, at least that's how I look at the whole thing. In the end though, Diver's Dream is unfortunately not all it could have been. It simply needed more freedom for exploration and maybe more levels, like more sunken ships or caves to explore, or dive even deeper to the dangerous parts of the ocean. But still, it's actually a decent game that you can beat in 5 hours or even less. Longer if you want to recover all types of items and buy everything in the shop, if you hate yourself that much. I actually liked the game, but in the end that may not be saying much, since I am weird to begin with and also like a lot of stuff others don't like or outright hate.